The Man of Many Talents, Part 2. By 1929, when he was 35, Graham was well on the way to fame and fortune. His wife and he kept a squadron of servants, including, for the first and only time in his life, a manservant for himself. With Jerry Newman, Graham had a compiled on investment record so inevitable that the great Bernard M. Baruch sought him out. Graham wound up his business to manage Brooks' money. Graham said, "I was highly flattered and flabbergasted, in fact, by his proposal, but I could not end so abruptly the close and highly satisfactory relations I had with my friends and clients. Those relations soon became much less satisfactory." Graham relates that though he was worried at the top of the market, he failed to act on his bearish hunch. The Graham-Newman partnership went into 1929 break with $2.5 million of capital, and they controlled about $2.5 million in hedged position, stocks owned long offset by stocks sold short. So they had besides about $4.5 million on outright long positions. So it was bad enough that they were leveraged. As Graham later came to realize, compounding that tactical error was a deeply rooted conviction that the stocks they owned were cheap enough to withstand any imaginable blow. So they came through a cash credibility down by 20% for the final quarter of 1929, almost heroic, but they gave up 50% in 1930, 16% in 1931, 3% in 1932, relatively excellent showing for a cumulative loss of 70%. So I blamed myself, not so much for my failure to protect myself against the disaster I had been predicting. Graham said, "As for having slipped into extravagant way of life, which I had not the temperament or capacity to enjoy, I quickly convinced myself that the true key to material happiness lay in a modest standard of living which could be achieved with little difficulty under almost all economic conditions." The margin of safety idea applied to personal finance. It can't be said that academic world immediately clasped security analysis to its breast as the definition, elucidation of value investing or of anything else. The aforementioned survey in the field of which Graham and Dodd made their signal contribution, common stock theory of investment, said, or 3 years after appearance of the first instance of security analysis. Smith's common stocks as long-term investment explained or had a challenged the long-held view that bonds were innately superior to equities. For one thing, Smith argued, the dollar was inflation prone, which meant the creditors were inherently disadvantaged. Not so the owners of common stock. If the companies in which they invested earned a profit, and if the managements of those companies retained a portion of that profit in business, and if those retained earnings in turn produced future earnings, the principal value of the investor's portfolio would tend to increase in accordance with the operation of compound interest. So Smith's timing was impeccable Not a year after, he said, the great college bull market erupted. So common stock as long-term investments only provided a handy rationale for chasing the market higher. So that stocks do, in fact, tend to excel in the long run, had entered the canon of American investment thought as a revealed truth. For his part, Graham entered a strong dissent to Smith's challenge, more exactly, its uncritical bullish application. So it was one thing to pay 10 times earnings for an equity investment, he noted, quite another to pay 20 to 40 times earnings. He skirted the important question of what asset value lay behind the stock certificate that people so feverishly and uncritically traded back and forth. Finally, embedded, it was an assumption that common stocks could be counted on to deliver in the future what they had done in the past. So Graham was not a believer. So he was a hard critic. However, he was also a generous one. In 1939, he was given John Burr Williams' Value to Review, So it was important that the investment value of a common stock and the present value of all future dividends, he proposed. William did not underestimate the significance of these loaded words. Armed with the critical knowledge, the author ventured to hope investors might restrain themselves from bidding stocks back up to the moon again. Graham, in whose capacious brain dwelled the talents both of the quant and behavioral financier, voiced his doubts about the forecast. The rub, as he pointed out, was that in order to apply Williams' method, one needed to make some very large assumptions about the future course of interest rates with the growth of profit and terminal value of the shares when growth stops. One wonders, and Graham mused, whether there may be too great discrepancy or not between the necessarily hit or missed character of these assumptions and highly refined mathematical treatment which they are subjected. Graham's technical accomplishment in security analysis by themselves could hardly have carried security analysis through its 5 points. Humanity and good humor explains its long life, adoring loyalty of a certain raw mint of Graham. Was there ever a Wall Street moneymaker better steeped than Graham in classical languages and literature in the financial history of his own time? I would bet no, with all the confidence of value investor laying down money to buy an especially cheap stock. Yet this is a great investment to a degree of prisoner of his own times. He could see that the experiences through which he lived were unique and Great Depression was in fact great anomaly. So to anyone understand the folly of projecting current experience into the unpredictable future, it was Graham. Yet this investment king, having spent many dollars in gold mines, described how a careful and risk-averse investor could prosper in every kind of macroeconomic conditions, arriving at a remarkable conclusion. One of the institutional investors, he asked, how should he invest? First, Graham definitely, that's the question. Who is he to prescribe for the experienced financiers at the head of America's philanthropic and educational institutions? Then he takes the astonishing plunge. An institution that can manage to get along the low income provided by high grade fixed value issued should, in our opinion, confine its holdings to this field. The better performance of common stock indexes over past period will in itself warrant the heavy responsibilities and recurring uncertainties in itself warrant the heavy inseparable from a common stock investment program. Could the greatest value investor have meant that? Did the man who stuck it out through ruinous losses in the depression years and went on to compile a remarkable long-term investment record really mean that common stock were not worth the bother? In 1940, with a new world war fanning the Roosevelt administration fiscal and monetary policies, high-grade corporate bonds yielded just 2.75%, while blue-chip equities yielded 5.1%. So Graham meant to say bonds were safer proposition than stocks. He said it. If Homer could not nod, so could Graham, and so can the rest of us, whoever we are. It may be a good lesson to the investor. Thank you.